lovely set and the lovely music. We'll be taking a guided tour of the hill. We'll be leaving now, and the music will continue here till 6 o'clock. And then we'll veer to the left of that, and we'll be heading over to the old farm. Just in front of us, and you'll have a sort of view of what we're talking about. We'll move to the next hill, and you'll see it better. There's one house, the ruins of one house, just here below in the bushes. One of the most peculiar things, I suppose, peculiar was the word. The land we were standing on is all of commonage, 196 acres of commonage, going back to the butt of the hill. This is the parish of Ballingarry. Grana is on the boundary wall over. Knockfierna Pinnacle is in the parish of Grana. As I said, this is Ballingarry. This area here was known as the Stricanes, as you will see in our booklet and various other writings. Just down in front of us, most peculiar in the sense that the field is in the middle of a commonage. It's all commonage all around, as you can see, and this field is situated inside in the middle. It was occupied by the Maley. We checked records back in 1850. Griffith's valuation gave it as Maley was the occupier. It later came into local hands, private hands. The old ruins of the house just below, you can see the stones where all the stones were pushed in, or probably it fell, and the farmer who owned the time probably lifted the stones and threw them inside the wall of the ruins of the house. Captain Maley was a woman, not a man as most people would have thought, and she was quite active involved with the White Boys during the end of the 1700s. As you will know, around this area, Kilmallock, West Limerick, Rockchapel, the Rockets and the White Boys. Various references in old newspapers that we get the Knockfierna district where they used to attack the landlords on the lowlands and return back here for refuge and hiding, and also for in the famine times as well, where they would have robbed food or whatever, they would have also returned back to the Knockfierna hill. Again, if anybody was coming, they would have a good view of any approach, shall we say. So that's the ruins of Captain Maley's house just down below. Off to my right over where the ferns are, you can't really make it out from here, but some years ago that area was burned, and you can easily make out the lazy beds. The lazy beds are ridges of potatoes from many of you maybe in the olden times, in the days of the shovel, when people would have made ridges from fields. There are quite a lot of those to be seen on that particular plot of ground just over there. Again, it is now known, seen as commoners because it isn't fenced in by anybody. So we had the lazy beds, and was that people had been operating there. The ruins of two more houses in that particular spot. We'll just do a quickie reading on what I have in front of me is a copy of Esther Evans back in 1940s. He wrote on Irish heritage, and what I have in front of me now is farmyards and fences. So we just snapped this. This is basically about houses and walls and dwellings from that time, you know. Immediately in front of the house, we have the old house. There's a couple of houses, an old house over here beyond, another one down below. So there was a house just here as well, Lafkin's. This was known as Lafkin's Haggart. The reason we came into this particular field is to give you an idea of the amount of work and effort and time that was spent in building a wall like that, the thickness of the wall, the height of the wall, and even it would do justice in front of anybody's house today, the way the wall is built. And as we had a lot of houses here. We have a little well just down here, a small bit just behind the bush really. There's a well. Over, if you turn it the other way, out front. The wind is catching us. Just, you can see the ruins of an old house over. That's on the passageway. There's a passageway going along there. It takes you out onto the main Croom Road, and also to take you down into Tinker's Cross near Ballingarry. So you can actually drive that one. It takes you out as Tinker's Cross back into Ballingarry again. There's a very fine well. It was known as Sullivan's Well. It's a purpose, I suppose, this year in particular because it never ran dry, and it hasn't gone down anything literally this year either. Sullivan's Well is at the end of that little boreen, and it never ran dry. And as I said, this year it hasn't run dry. This one here was known as Larkin's Well. That has gone dry in the past couple of months. Just over in the fog bushes over there, if any of you want to take a look in a few minutes, you'll see the ruins of a house. It's Martin, if you want to move in close down in the bushes, you will actually see where the walls were built. And as we said Monday night in Ballingarry, that during the 1940s, Kelly's daughters, etc. from Ballingarry, there was a scheme. The council were buying stones, and the people came up and took the ruins of the houses and the walls. Obviously, the ruins of houses were handier to take because they were on the one spot. In that particular location, there was another house here. It was Larkin's house, just where we are. Over behind the man, you can see the ruins of another house. It was Sullivan's. He died around in 1947. That was the last of the people living here. There was another house further over, Henny Green's house. She lived till about 1962. She would have been the last person living up on the hillside itself, on this side of the hill. Back to the walls. Immediately in front of the house is the traditional location of a dung heap. The dung heap before each door was commented on by nearly every 1920 traveller. That's a description of houses in the 19th century. The apologists, it is true, remind us that tenants would not move the dunghill for fear of having their rents raised because of improvements, but its proximity to the dwelling house need occasion no surprise when we called it down to a century or two ago. In remote parts, the dung was allowed to accumulate at the end of the living room. Recalled that in 1837, a school teacher wrote that some houses in Donegal had within their walls from 10 to 15 tons weight of dung and only cleaned out once a year. Some description, gentlemen, of a house in the last century. Nowadays, however, from the hygienic motives, the manure is removed to a less conspicuous part of the farm, though it is possible inside the door. That's basically from the last century. It was, and again, it's all taken away at the back. I have been told the names of the people here, but I forget. Here on your own rather than myself, we're not going to do it all today. I'll talk about the top part of the hill. You can see where the stone walls went up the hill, across the hill, all over the hill actually there were stone walls. In some cases the walls, very interestingly, are unfinished. They go so far across the hill and they stop. They don't go any further than the wall. That's where they're all finished. So quite a lot of stone walls. Up here above on a hump of the hill back here behind us, quite an interesting thing. Only recently actually we spotted it. There's the remains of a house. But rather than the remains of a house really is the fact that we can see the pathway where it was cleared away. The stones were cleared away from the far side of the hill onto that high mound up above. Just way over the hill there you can see the high point of the hill. Completely cleared into it. Again further over, just down from that particular high mound over there, there is a very fine stone wall similar to the ones here inside the wall. Very high stone wall, very fine stone wall. But what makes it interesting is inside the stone wall is not what you would expect to find. It's literally stones all over the place. The stones are picked from the outside near the stone wall, but they never obviously got into the inside of the field. So it's a very fine stone wall, and all the side of the field really are piles of stones. So that's one job that was left unfinished. This particular place here was the last house, as I said, apart from the one over, which is still together, but it's farther over on the hill. This one was Sullivan's. Sullivan's owned land around here, and the well below, that little boreen goes on down. It was also called a mass pat, this particular one, because you could see below the boreen went straight across. This boreen here meets the one coming across, something like you'd find in Maiden Street in Newcastle West, indeed, you know. So one would wonder why they bothered coming both ways here when they could have gone down one and met a little track below, which wasn't on the roadway anyhow. But just below where the trees are, a little below the wall here, just inside the wall, literally 50 yards, that is a reasonably good road. You can drive it from the Tinkers Cross, you can drive straight across and down, and you come out below near that yellow bungalow. That's actually passable, that road. You can drive that road. That's the one, and as I said, just over here at Sullivan's Well, there's a little junction which takes you up along here, this one we're after coming down. And then this one was an old boreen that was used by the people here. Sullivan's lived in this particular house. He died in 1947 in Croom Hospital, and the Sullivans, they were there in 1850. We don't have any records of that on this, but they were living here in 1850 with Griffith's valuation. It was a 3-bedroom house with a large kitchen. We have descriptions of that from some of the older people who have taken the details. Just over to the side where that lady is sitting in blue, just above her head there, you can see the rather unusual stone where we would have shoot today. The water came down so far off the thatch, and then it threw out the water. Rather unusual. As thatched houses there, you don't have to see that type of design, where the rain came off the thatch, dropped, and then it just threw it off out again. Nice stone work. Just in here beside us again, there's only recently we saw it indeed. And I suppose if we had got over a bit more, it would have been in here. It might have been a dog's house, a hen house, or keeping pots cool or whatever, or a kind of a fridge. It's quite large, but it's about 4 feet high, I suppose. 4 foot all around, probably 6 feet, 4 feet, I'd imagine, on the inside. Quite a lot of doors in the old houses, as I said, pots, hens, etc. You should into those. And again, you can see very fine stonework in all the walls around here. Mainly, I would have thought that people were clearing the walls, and of course, the main thing, I suppose, is that the population was there. It's not there today. So we'll head back up again to where we left our second speaker. The corn up down the shed at the end of it. Here's the hip corner hill back to the road here behind us. And you'll see the people still over yonder. So we move on to the fort. That's very far from the crowd here actually. Today we obviously went the other way around, so we lost most of the crowd in the way. The Colleen Barn you've been asking about her. The passage that we were hoping to get cleared by next year would be, if we can get funds and so forth, would be from the 2 houses down below here. Out over the cattle you'll see 2 houses. The boreen, that's the main road going across from Ballingarry to Knockfierna. So that passageway is quite wide, not like the one we went up today. The one we went up today you couldn't do anything with because it's too narrow. This passage is quite wide and reasonably good, so we would hope to get that one developed. The gateways here below, and on up into the hill. And as you can see the area above behind where we came in just beside the wire, it's quite level, so it should be easily enough to get that area developed as a car park. It would make it easier and a lot more helpful for everybody if that had been developed or would be developed hopefully next year. That's that on the development. On the Colleen Barn, on your booklet, in an interview with Paddy Conway back in 1974, Padraig O'Madine, Michael Kearns and indeed Paddy Conway regrettably have all died since that article was published. It's a straight extract from the Cork Examiner in 1973. And it was Paddy Conway actually who gave me a copy of that Cork Examiner back about 10 years ago. The house here referred to, the house he was living in, is those big trees down here. You see the old mortar cars in a bit of a shed, and then you have lots of ash trees or whatever. The house is just inside those. It's an old house, a small house. So when you're moving back this evening, you will find there's 2 new houses here on top of the hill. Just as you go down the hill and it's down the bottom of the hill, the house is on your right hand side.
I won't say a very great deal about fort because it's nearly 6 o'clock and we'll be late for the cows. This fort is a normal sized ring fort. And ring forts were ancient Celtic dwellings. They go back long before the Roman Empire. And there are ones found in Europe that were capable of housing thousands of people. So we have nothing like that in Ireland. Though there are some forts larger than the normal ones. There's a fairly large one down in Clonca. It probably belonged to some Tuatha chieftain or something like that. But these were the normal size of a ring fort. This one is 100 metres in diameter, and they were all much of that kind. Well, they were not houses, they were just dwelling places, and in them lived the better off members of the community. They lived at one side in a lot of little mud and wattle huts, and on the other side they had impounded the cattle at night. They had to do this to protect the cattle from predators such as wolves and of course other human beings, because the cattle were the currency of the time. So apart from their own value to the people, they were actually the actual currency by which they could exchange for other riches. Now, this fort is traditionally associated with Finn McCool and the Fianna, who were defeated at the Battle of Gowra in the the 4th century. Now, Finn McCool and the Fianna wasn't all that great, but in mythology and tradition, they have grown in very large proportions. They are giants, they are fairies, they are magicians, they are everything. Indeed, you would even get the poems of O'Sheen, and you had Oscar, and you had Finn himself. But Finn had a camping ground here in Knockfierna, according to tradition, and this fort is associated with him. Really, I don't believe that it was a fort for Finn, because a temporary camping ground wouldn't contain a fort. And it's this peculiar in this sense. This belonged to some wealthy man, because there's a double rampart in it. And forts were made by making a circle and digging around it, excavating the ground, and heaping the spile up on the inside and building a high rampart. And then there was a wooden palisade built on top of that. There was just the one entrance, which had possibly a portable timber bridge, which was taken up at night for to close the gate. That seemed to be, myself and this thing don't seem to be agreeing too well. But this one was different insofar as it had an outer rampart as well. And the moat or fosse was exceptionally deep. In 1905, Henry Malone came here, and he spoke about the depth of the fosse. An old man that he met here told him that he had dug in the fosse to bury a dead animal, and he dug a deep grave, but he never got beyond the shale which had slided down from the two ramparts. Obviously, much more of it has slid down today, but he measured the steepest part of it, and it was 30 feet 6 inches from the top of the rampart to the bottom of the then existing fosse. So at the earlier periods, it must have been well over 40 feet from the bottom to the top of the fosse. Of course, there would be a reason for building digging that fosse so deep and building the second rampart, because down on the lowlands, the fosse and moat usually filled with water, which was a deterrent to anybody attacking. But this didn't happen here, so I suppose the deep fosse was built to sort of fortify, as a greater fortification for the fort. There's very little else I can say, I think, unless anybody wants to ask any question to get my memory going. The families would move from the fort to other residents, towns or what they were, and they would move out to the summer or Boolean grazing grounds, where they had other huts, and they would stay there for the cattle, and then they would, in the meantime, they'd make white meats, as they called it, butter and cheese of a type, and they had no way of preserving those, and they would put them into a skin bag, and they would bury them. No, but if there was a bog nearby, it was the best place to bury them. But very often, the mark where they buried them was moved or lost, and they couldn't find them again. And we're finding them now, we couldn't at all.
Ned, excellent details. I'd be lost in the fort without Ned. Thank you all for coming today. We'll be heading out over the barbed wire, either under or over, and then we'll be onto the open flat hill, and we'll be back to the platform. As I said, if your cars are over, it's probably nearly as easy to go over across the hill at this stage and down the passage over. Again, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
A great crowd had gathered outside of Kilmainham, their heads all uncovered, they knelt on the ground. For inside a grim prison lay a brave Irish soldier, his life for his country about to lay down. And he marched to his death like a true son of Ireland. The firing party he bravely did face. When the order rang out, present arms and fire, James Connolly fell into a ready-made grave. The black flag was hoisted, the cruel deed was over. Gone was the man who loved Ireland so well. There was many a sad heart in Dublin that morning, when the martyr James Connolly, the Irish rebel. God's curse on New England, your cruel-hearted monsters. Your deeds they would shame all the devils in hell. There are no flowers blooming, but the shamrock is growing on the grave of James Connolly, the Irish rebel. The forecourts of Dublin, the English bombarded, the spirit of freedom they tried hard to quell. But the bold IRA stood shoulder to shoulder as the blood from their bodies flowed down Sackville Street. Many years now have gone by since the Easter Rebellion, when the guns of Britannia they loudly did yell. But above all the din came the cry, no surrender. 'Twas the voice of James Connolly, the Irish rebel. 'Twas the voice of James Connolly, the Irish rebel.